Throw your uppercut, try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whisper in my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, pulling the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home. Begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. Your crying age in defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, pulling the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, 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 yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, only the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, oh, oh,
In a world where a host can't even operate his own microphone, a suit costs $400, and nobody knows what time it is, despite the clock that's literally built into the show, one man has the courage to stand up and say, it's in time, not on time.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, we've put aside the simulcasting stuff for a bit. We've got operator Starsky and 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿 with us today. Gentlemen, how are you?
I'm good.
And, is 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐿 still there? Oh. All right. And for whatever reason, I'm either not getting audio on 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐿 or we'll get that sorted out. All right. So he's going through the Chicago rough neighborhoods, so we'll see. I'm sure he'll be fine. Before we begin, just a reminder: we've got some really good shows coming up. On Tuesday, we're going to have Pat Lowinger on to discuss misconceptions about policing in the United States. He's been around the block, so it's going to be a good conversation. And then a week from Tuesday, I think it's just going to be an amazing show. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who, as 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐿 actually just educated me on, is the second highest rank you can have in the Army, just short of a 4-star general. He was the commander of all U.S. forces in Europe, and he was also the NATO commander of all NATO ground forces. He is still advising for NATO in terms of logistics and a few other projects he's got going on that we are going to discuss with him. But in particular, we're going to be talking with him about how NATO is dealing with the current events, what the red line for NATO really is, what NATO has done to prepare for the eventuality that Russia does not stop at Ukraine or does in fact engage in the use of WMDs. Also, his assessment of the tactical and strategic options on the ground and how that is progressing. So we're looking forward to that again a week from Tuesday. I think that's going to be a great show. So please do make sure you've got your notifications on so that you know about it. Join us on the Discord in case there are any changes, and you can monitor that there. But in the meantime, thank you all for coming. 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐿, it looks like you're back. You there? All right, he's speaking, but I can't hear him. Starsky, can you hear him?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
All right, what I'm going to do is switch out.
Well, you're the only one I care if they can hear me. I don't really care if Nick ever hears me.
Yeah, you realize I can hear you now.
I can talk about him. Oh, damn it.
So we got that fixed just in time for the first time in the show's history. So, Starsky, what's been going on in Ukraine? There's a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, but I wanted to hear from you. Just give us a basic rundown of what's been going on in the last week in Ukraine.
So exactly 1 week ago, we saw Ukrainians throwing punches at a Russian representative in Ankara for disrespecting the Ukrainian flag. The next day, we learned that for the first time in history, the incredible Wunderwaffe known as 𝐒𝐸-47 was intercepted by the Ukrainian anti-air system Patriot, which was confirmed. And only 3 days later, we saw this amazing Russian parade, military parade on the Red Square in Moscow. It was an impressive sight, I gotta admit. So I think that we can discuss it today and share a bit about it because it totally deserves that.
It was impressive, absolutely.
Yeah, to say the least. Also, on 8th of May, we had one of the most massive terror Russian drone attacks on Kyiv. We know that approximately 30 terrorist drones were intercepted, and just the next day we had another strike, this time involving Russian missiles, again, that were intercepted. I believe among 25 missiles that were launched, 23 were intercepted. I might be wrong because some of those missiles fell down, retired while flying. And of course there was a Eurovision that started this week, and if people, a lot of people say that they don't like Eurovision. Guys, Eurovision is awesome, and I started watching Eurovision since the day when Conchita Wurst won the contest. I wasn't a big fan of Conchita, but the way this person made all the Russian asses just literally explode in a massive explosion in Russia, it was so beautiful. And what else? Russians, because they are not very smart, they started spreading rumors that General Zaluzhny died. So the next day, General Zaluzhny published his picture from a wedding that he attended in Kiev. Two veterans were being married. And also we learned that the United States Attorney General confirmed that the arrested assets of the Russian oligarch Konstantin Malafeev will be transferred to Ukraine to help rebuild our country. And why it's important, because again, it happened for the first time. And I hope that this will turn into a trend. So that's pretty much it, besides of successful Ukrainian counterattack in Bakhmut. Prigozhin went completely hysterical, and basically that's all.
Well, that's a pretty successful counter in an area where progress has been measured for the last 8 months. Progress has been measured by the meter. Per day. It's now in the last week, Ukraine has made at least about 2 kilometers advance in their counterattack. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. And one of my subscribers, Joseph, wrote me an email saying this. A snail has a minimum speed of 0.0028 meters per second. The Russian front on August 12, 2022, was only 7 kilometers from the center of Bakhmut. It took 8 months to reach the center of Bakhmut, and there is still a quarter of the city to conquer, not to mention the western suburbs. 8 months are roughly 20,700,000 seconds. 7,000 meters divided by this number gives us 0.00033 meters per second. So it follows that a snail at its slowest speed travels at a speed 8.5 times greater than the Russian army. A snail traveling from where the Russian army was for the span of 8 months would have covered 58,000 meters or 58 kilometers, basically 36 miles. Our snail would have traveled through Chasiv Yar, Kramatorsk, passed through Sloviansk, and would be 4 kilometers outside the city at its slowest speed. So yeah, I can say that the gains that were achieved by the Ukrainian army were pretty much impressive, comparing to the attempts performed by the Russian forces.
I learn something new every day. So basically, if Russia had farmed for a year, like a whole bunch of snails, and then just let them loose on Ukraine, they would have made more progress than the Russian army. Good to know. All right. Well, I'm going to tell Lance that one. He's going to love that. So, let's see. We were, you had mentioned, we should talk about Eurovision. You had also mentioned the parade where Russia showed off its tank, I guess.
Glory. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened there?
So what happened? I decided to compare this parade and their previous parade they had in 2022, and of
Hmm.
course, I noticed several minor differences. So, uh, what I noticed was that there were basically no military personnel marching on this parade. They involved like MCHS. MCHS in Russia is like Ministry of uh, Natural Disasters. Something like that is the closest translation. So those are basically like rescuers and firefighters.
Hmm.
And comparing to the previous year, they had, for example, Taman division. I believe that there was even Pskov division. I can be wrong, but I remember clearly that two combat division, and those are famous in Russia. They were present last year. This year, not so much. We didn't see them. Also, they brought several BTRs, armored vehicles,
Hmm.
that were built on the platform of so-called Boomerang, super modern, miraculous Russian armored vehicles. And what's exciting about it is that they only have like 3 of them in Russia, and they are mostly used in different exhibitions and stuff like that. And they brought all 3 BTRs to this parade, of course. Last year, there were all kinds of BTRs and BMPs, BTR 82, most widely used by Russian troops. And they also showed, again, tank. Okay, I know everybody laughs at this tank. But the most interesting thing is, just analyzing other pieces of equipment and people that they had there, because this year they only had several S-400 anti-air defense systems on this parade, while previously they had Panzer, 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴 Panzer, 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴 Tor, all those anti-air systems that we didn't see this year at the parade. Obviously, it's because they are being used at this moment in different parts of Russia, around Kremlin. So another thing is they had absolutely no aviation. Last year they had no aviation flying because the excuse was that the weather wasn't really good.
Hmm.
This year the weather was absolutely perfect, but still I think that obviously they lacked experienced pilots, maybe, because those are usually involved into such parades. So there were quite a few things to notice, because it tells a lot. It tells a lot. Also, Putin had his traditional speech on this parade, where again he mentioned that Ukraine never existed, and other things that didn't sound like Nazi bullshit, of course. So that was the Russian parade.
I'd like to educate people just a bit for a minute, and I just realized it's awfully condescending, but I'm going to do it anyway, because in the U.S. we don't always study this element of history, and I think it's worth noting. I'm not sure that the Nazis were in some ways quite as bad as we Americans like to think, and I mean that in one respect. Everybody knows that Hitler eliminated about 4 million Jews. What they don't really realize is that he was an amateur compared to Stalin, who eliminated at least 10 times as many of his own people. Stalin, well, we think of Russia as our allies in World War II, and they were only because he was betrayed by Hitler. Stalin and Hitler had created a compact to divvy up all of Europe. Stalin violated that compact, and Hitler, who was probably going to betray him anyway, but nonetheless decided to advance that schedule and then invaded the Soviet Union. But Stalin became our ally only because he had no other choice. He was going to get wiped out, and if he had had his way, he'd have gotten to keep Poland, which, by the way, he invaded with the German Nazis. So as bad as Nazis were, I think there's a very good argument to be made that the Soviets were even worse, and we're dealing with descendants of that very same ideology. So I find it interesting that Nazi is the worst thing you can say, and they're terrible, obviously. But if you study history, but the takeaway in terms of what we're talking about right now is that the Soviets rewrote history, and it turns out, if you read a Soviet history book, the whole world would have lost World War II to Nazi Germany if it wasn't for Russia. And while Russia certainly did help, if in no other way than by absorbing a huge attack from Nazi Germany, they did not win World War II and save the entire planet, and they certainly didn't do it single-handedly. So the past, in the past, these Victory Day parades really have been a celebration of how not the Allies defeated Germany in World War II, but how Russia defeated all Nazis across the planet. Is that about right, Starsky?
Absolutely, because Russia does not recognize the Second World War. They only recognize the Great Patriotic War that started in 1941 and finished on 8th of May, 1945. Not with the capitulation of Japan, but with the defeat of the Nazi Germany. And that's it. I mean, they don't recognize that they would not be able to win without the help from the Allies, without the Lend-Lease and anything like that, which is kind of funny. They also like to claim that they could also win without Ukrainians, even though millions of Ukrainians laid their lives while fighting, and a lot of other weird bullshit, because they also, and they started talking about it, I believe, in the early 2000s, that basically all their allies, like former allies, they are actually Nazi as well, and they had to finish them during the World War II, during this Great Patriotic War, but unfortunately they failed to do so.
Yeah, so this parade is a huge deal. Is it the single biggest? I mean, I know the October revolution's obviously very important. There's a couple of others, but I think this is I'm not like the master of Russian culture, and I'm sure you aren't either. But is this the biggest celebration they have? This one, or is it? Well, I forget the date in October, but the Red Revolution, or the what do they call it? Dear Lord, where Lenin? My brain is hiccuping on this. It's a huge event, and it's a huge source of national pride. Do you think this is having an impact on citizens? Do you think they're at all aware, or they're just like, oh, we don't? I mean, for Americans in particular, we're used to sort of thinking at some point Russians are going to wake up and say something is really, really wrong. Do you think that's going to happen, or has that happened? But even if they wake up, they're not going to do anything about it.
It's like a cult, It's like they have those black and white picture, like to an ordinary Russian, right? To a common Russian person, this day is something like, I don't know what to compare it to, because it's kind of crazy. It would be like birthday of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Something like that. Because normal people, they don't have this habit of doing all that crazy shit that Russians do or North Koreans do during such holidays. It's like they use, and I had a huge collection of that. They use like black and white pictures portraying their great grandparents that sacrificed their like lives and health and yada yada. At the same time, sometimes they use pictures of Luftwaffe because they don't really care, like Luftwaffe pilots, sometimes Americans in Japan. So, like the most recent, the cringiest probably picture that I saw was published by some Russian mole. I believe that someone tried to make a joke, and this person succeeded because it was literally portraying Hitler only without a mustache, as someone's grandpa who fought in Berlin, you know. So it was kind of cringy, kind of funny. They don't really know their history, and they don't even really care, because this celebration, this Victory Day, and this cult of this great patriotic war is basically never-ending source of myths that they can create and use in their propaganda. The actual history doesn't matter at all.
So, with the changing the topic slightly, with the what appears to be almost the collapse of the Wagner group in Ukraine, Russia is threatening to move up to being the second best military in Ukraine. We don't know. Wagner is still holding on to that position, but you know, Russia's threatening. What is going on, do you think, there, and how much of that, basically Wagner has said that they're not going to fight anymore in Bakhmut. Is that just sort of a ploy? Are they serious about that? And obviously there have been some serious gains. How are you guys treating that? Is that a victory? Is that more progress to a larger goal? I don't think that. It doesn't seem to me, and I know you can't discuss this, doesn't seem to me to be part of this larger offensive that all of us are anticipating. So could you tell us a bit more about that, I guess, is what I'm saying.
We don't trust Prigozhin, of course, because Prigozhin was saying a lot of different bullshit. He was saying that the counteroffensive already began like 1 week ago. And then he was saying that it was gonna start. Then he was saying that they were gonna withdraw from Bakhmut on 10th of May. Currently, we see that they keep being present there. He was saying that he doesn't receive shells. Now he says that he receives shells. Then he stated again that they don't have enough ammunition. So whatever Prigozhin says, you should just ignore it because it makes no sense. And in general, listening to what Russians say is a bad habit, and you just should ignore whatever they say. Unless they want to give up.
I actually let me circle back. There was one comment I failed to. There was one point I wanted to make. I think Andrew maybe had a. So on the parade, Andrew, did you have a thought on that? I know we moved on.
I was not asking. Yeah, I was actually quite impressed with the parade. The fact that it didn't break down 300 meters into it due to lack of logistical support was quite an improvement. Maybe they're learning.
We should point out, yes, that tank did make it from the beginning of the parade to the end of the parade successfully. And I think we should applaud the Russians, I guess. They've learned something. I forgot, we've been talking about the... I'm still very slow reading Russian, but last time you were here, the word was "po-nemetsky," which actually means two things in Russian, if I recall. Po-nemetsky means German, So it was somebody was asking, I think, 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐿𝐴 𝐿 do you speak German? But the other thing it means is enemy. It's the same word. So to them, you know, the worst thing you can possibly be is a Nazi. And I think it's by the way, I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with the caveat I mentioned earlier, but they took the invasion of Russia particularly personally, which I understand. But having said that, the reason it struck them so hard was because Hitler was an ally. Hitler was a buddy. And that's the part that people keep forgetting. It's like, oh, we've been betrayed. Yeah, because who are you friends? Who are you holding hands with? Come on, let's say it with me.
Yeah, 1939, they had a mutual parade in Brest-Litovsky together with German Nazi Germans. There's a lot of pictures out there, and for some reason Russians don't really like to remember about that.
Or that they invaded Poland. They had already decided who was going to get what half of Poland, and they had divvied up all of Europe. Is only when Stalin got greedy on Hitler. How fucked up do you have to be for Hitler to think you have a problem? Just saying. All right. So,
just ask a liberal today about the conservatives. You can find out pretty quick.
And Jets 115 gifted 5 in time. Thank you so much. That was really nice of you. We really appreciate that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's see. So we've talked about the parade. So the progress in Bakhmut, are you optimistic that momentum's going to continue, or are they going to pause and wait until sort of the rest of the front catches up? Is there anything that you can tell us about that progress and how Ukraine is either leveraging it or responding to it?
Well, logically, of course, they have to wait until the rest of the front catches up, because you cannot have like appendix anywhere on the front lines. It should be even everywhere. But I don't really think that we can predict anything here, because again, we are planning the counteroffensive, and the Ukrainian armed forces will strike where the Russians are least expecting them to strike. At the same time, in Bakhmut, let me think if I will tell you a state secret. I don't think so. So the reason why it happened there could be one of the directions where this counteroffensive will develop eventually. Could be, of course. It could be not the case, but I know for sure that currently some very, very angry guys are operating there in that area, and we're talking about the guys that were preparing all this time and training and stuff, and we can see some of the results that they were able to show with this small counterattack that was still bigger than anything Russians had in the past 4 months. So currently we will see more and more those fresh, trained and prepared Ukrainian troops being involved into combat here and there. At different spans of the front lines, and Russians have no chance, absolutely.
Well, and they had. I mean, this is something we've talked about. They're not going to get any better troops than what they started the war with. That's not going to happen. They've been scraping the bottom of the barrel. They've been literally emptying the asylums. They've been emptying prisons, saying, would you like a pardon? Go fight on the front lines. And that's because that's all they've got left. And their equipment isn't going to get any better. They've run out of most of the things that the high-end stuff that they can use. So they are opening factories to build more tanks, but the tanks are from the 1930s through the 1960s. The most advanced tank that they are currently producing is a 1960 design, because anything after that requires computer components, and they can't put any computer components into them because they don't have any. So now, my understanding is a lot of the equipment, most of, if not all actually, of the equipment recently promised to Ukraine has been delivered. The U.S. has just delivered Abrams tanks, not for use in the war, at least not right now, but for training. They've been delivered to Germany, where Ukrainians are training on the Abrams so that they can use those in the field. Is that accurate? And how much equipment do you think is outstanding?
Yes, it's true. They delivered Abrams tanks. We also know that our crews are being trained to operate other tanks, Challengers and Leopards. The Leopards and Challengers, I believe, already arrived to Ukraine. We know that from 500 tanks that we have received, our Polish friends and allies brought us more than, I believe, 300 tanks, which is amazing number. Again, I don't really think that Russians have like even slightest chance using their older tanks. One thing that I forgot to mention about the parade is that in 2022 we saw all kinds of Russian tanks shown at the parade, including T-90M Proryv, including even the legendary Russian Armata, which wasn't even towed with a horse, for example. And this time, yeah, T-34. Like the craziest comment I received, I believe several days ago, was that some Russian person, a Russian individual, said that despite all the efforts, Russia managed to have this parade gloriously. And yeah, I replied that, yeah, we were all very, very much impressed with all those tanks at the Red Square. It was amazing.
Actually, and I want to ask a question about air defense and how that's been, because Russia has dramatically increased their attacks, as you had mentioned earlier. But before we do that, 13.99 Canadian from level 70, and also 5 CHF. Oh dear Lord, I should. Oh, that's that's Swiss franc. He was in. I was going to ask too. I was like, I don't know why that one won't stick. So thank you so much. And it's Yvonne who's super chatted and super stickered several times. And before we get into anything else, it is there's so much crap going on in everybody's lives, so much crap going on in the world. It can be pretty disheartening. We are genuinely privileged to be able to talk to Starsky every single Friday and to be able to inform people as to what's going on. I think that's I enjoy doing it. It's a privilege for us, and it's a privilege to be able to help in some small way. So every single super chat, every donation, every sticker, all goes to the charity of Starsky's choice. He has chosen the Vatra volunteer organization, which helps a number of units, including Starsky's unit in Ukraine. So every donation, the YouTube unfortunately does take a percentage out of it, but what we get past that percentage, all of it, 100% goes to the Vatra volunteer organization, and we are privileged to be able to help in that way. So thank you all for thank you, Starsky, as always, for coming on and being a delight to talk to and a lot of fun. But thank you also for helping us spread the word, and thank you to our supporters. So the question was from level 70. Hi, Starsky. Do you have any further information on what weapons supposedly neutral South Africa allegedly provided to Russia?
Unfortunately, I don't know the details. I know that there were smaller firearms. There were shells, I believe. So there, all that weaponry was loaded on the sanctioned Russian ship, and then it was delivered to the Russian dock. So we know that the U.S. basically exposed the president of the South African Republic, and they had evidence that it actually happened. But on the other hand, I don't really think that what happened in South Africa actually represents the attitude of South Africans towards Ukraine. So we should remember that it's different things.
And we're following that. That's still new. So we're following that on our Discord. We follow, and this is an educational show. We obviously Ukraine we've been covering a lot recently for obvious reasons, but we cover any big national and U.S. story. So join us on the Discord and see what we're following. And we have channels there for gaming, philosophy, politics, anything you could be interested in. Hope you guys will join there. And we're following that. We've got a channel dedicated not only to Ukraine, but to any breaking news or big things going on there, and that's one we've been keeping an eye on. I don't know how that's going to develop. Lance is also there. Commander Lance McMillan is there, and he answers questions. So hopefully we'll be able to provide you with more information. I have to say the hypersonic missiles are a big thing. A lot of people have been talking about that. We started talking about that a while ago, especially when Russia was known to have one, China have one, and the U.S. had been a little behind in that game. But the whole point of it is that they're virtually impossible to shoot down, even with an advanced missile defense system like the Patriot. Having said that, congratulations, Ukraine managed to do it. How bad have the attacks been, and what are the air defenses looking like? And is that something that you have optimism is either going to improve or at least stay relatively good?
We would like to have 20 more Patriot systems here in Ukraine, of course, because again, I talked about it previously, but we have 25 major cities. 3 of them are being occupied by Russians, but still. As for the hypersonic missile, I don't really know why they call it hypersonic missile. If I believe the speed of the 𝐒𝐴𝐿 in reality is something around Mach 3, Mach 3.5, which is not really hypersonic. It's just,
it's supersonic. It's faster than the speed of sound, but not. Yeah.
There is a difference, though. Again, Russian missiles, Russian cruise missiles that are being used against Ukrainian cities, they can also produce this speed. So before striking the target, a cruise missile usually has a subsonic speed of approximately 850-70 kilometers per hour, and then while on the attack course, while on the striking course, those missiles usually make Mach 2, Mach 3. So nothing really special here. Again, Russian advertisement usually overestimates everything they make, from those hilarious flying tanks Ka-52 to hypersonic missiles like 𝐾𝐚𝐬, but again, nothing really special here. So it happened for the first time in history, I agree, which is cool, but at the same time, I think that we will see more of that.
I'm going to pass it on to Xandering in just a minute, see if he has any questions. I have 1 or 2 remaining questions, but I want to make sure that Xandering has a chance to ask what he wants to ask. I want to remind people that next week on Tuesday, Pat Lowinger to discuss U.S. misconceptions about policing. He's he's been around the block on this issue. So I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation. And then a week from Tuesday, we're going to have on Lieutenant General Benjamin Hodges. Xander include me into the fact that Lieutenant General is actually the second highest. It's just below 4-star general. He was the commander of all U.S. forces in Europe, and he was also the NATO commander of all NATO ground forces. So he has been around the block as well. We're going to have him on to discuss how NATO is responding to and is likely to respond to Russia. What will Russia be as a threat in the future, and what he thinks the outcome of the war, if he's willing to predict. And I just to talk to this guy, I was like, okay, let me give you a list of the questions. We don't want any surprises. We did. We're going to ask him what we want to know, and we're not going to pull any punches on that. But he knows all the questions in advance, and so we're gonna ask him what he thinks Ukraine is, how this is going to play out ultimately, and also what its effect is going to be for NATO, and how Russia is going to be a threat to NATO in the future. So I think that's going to be a great show, week from Tuesday. And for the next Starsky show, 1 week from today at this time, I would like to do a call-in show. You will be able to call our number. It's a U.S. number. If you're in the U.S., if you can call in the U.S. for free, it's going to be a free call for you. I forget what state it's in. I think it's like Tennessee or something like that. But call in and ask Starsky your questions yourself. Come give Starsky a call. Say hi or just chat. I was going to say, hey, you can talk to Xandering, Lance, and I, but okay, let's be real. That's not why anyone's going to be calling it. I'm gonna pay a friend $5 just to call in and say, oh, Starsky's fine, but I just wanted to talk to you, Nick. It'll cost me $5, but it'll be worth it. Anyways, so next week
call it for you.
Yeah, because nobody will recognize your voice.
You gotta drop an announcement into a Russian Telegram channel. I believe that there will be a lot of people willing to talk.
If we put this into a Russian Telegram channel, people will be surrendering on our air. Russians will just be calling up, please, man, what can I do? Either that, or they'll be asking if they can find a snail to help with Russian military pacing. All right, Xander, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask, or anything that you wanted to talk about?
No.
Okay.
I'm just trying to. I'm thinking at the same time as I'm talking, okay. And as you know, conservatives aren't good at doing that, so I had to slow it down a little.
Well, liberals aren't good at doing that either.
Generally, speaking of Russian super weapons, you should take it not just with a grain of salt. You should take it with a freaking shovel of salt, because, like, I remember watching those Russian TV shows related, dedicated to their super weapons, and it was so. In 2015, probably 2016, it was so freaking cringy. Starting from those robots, like Boris the robot.
I never heard of that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is this? I got to hear about this.
Like Boris the robot, basically there's two versions of this robot. There's Boris... Was he Boris or Simeon? What? Stepan, Oleg. So there are two versions. One is like a doll, which can barely move its limbs. Another one is like a person wearing a suit, or is it like a robot with a human organism inside? I have no idea, but it looks cringy as fuck. There is this. They were in one of their shows. They were showing like super secret Russian laser weapon, and I still have a screenshot of that laser weapon. And basically, there's like a bunch of pipes, like plumbing pipes. Those like plastic plumbing pipes. there was a dog with like ATGM attached to its spine, and what they did was they basically bought a robot dog at AliExpress, and they put like black suit on this robot and glued a NTGM on its back. And my God, what was the craziest one? AK-100, that super modern Russian rifle. They were advertising it as, again, like no analogs. It's like they were advertising it as like the new, like completely new rifle following traditional approach. And basically it's the same freaking Kalashnikov AK-74, only with a different gas tube, which tends to rot, by the way, and telescopic stock that was literally copy-pasted from M4. And many things like that. So I remember first time when...
Whoop.
And he was like, this is a new weapon that will obliterate all of our enemies. It was either in 2015 or 2016. So while talking about it, he had like a screen behind his back, and there was like a presentation, and there was a photo of that hypersonic, whatever, Wunderwaffe flying. Basically, internet users recognized this picture because on this picture there was a concept of Boeing airplane that was flipped upside down and presented as a hypersonic missile 𝐒𝐚𝐬. You can still find it online. So whenever they talk about some super weapon or whatever, it's like just ignore it. I keep repeating that. Just ignore what they freaking say, because it makes no sense.
You explain
the death ray, the
robot.
Ray.
The death ray. Yeah.
You explain this robot, and the only thing I can think of is danger, Will Robinson, danger.
Just Google robot Boris. You will be freaking impressed.
Well, and we were talking about this last night. The reality, though, is that it's a little different than propaganda, the way we're used to and the way we think about it. The reality is many Russians are fully aware that this is utter horseshit, but they don't care. They sort of just believe what they're told to believe. They know that that's what they're doing. It's like if you're a good Russian, you just believe whatever the government tells you you're supposed to believe. Is that right? And I'd like to welcome Lance McMillan. And so there's a question for both of you. Lance, your camera is off, which may be deliberate, and if so, I can.
Yes.
But
yes.
Oh, all right. So, anyways, you were. So is that about? I mean, that's a foreign concept, but I'm not like off base there when I say that that's sort of the culture of Russia is to, for most citizens, it's like, well, they've told me to believe this, and I know it's horseshit, and I know it's silly, but that's what a patriot does. That's what somebody who's a team player does. Is I believe, or literally government gaslighting.
I'm not sure I would go so far as to say that's what a patriot, that's what a team player does. It's more a matter of, I think, knowing that standing up and saying that's BS will get the weight of the state to fall upon you. So you just kind of shrug your shoulders and go, yeah, well, okay, whatever you say, boss. And in private, they may say, what utter BS, but, there you are.
All right.
I'm not interested in politics.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So Lance,
now that
I'm so glad
people. Now that the important people are here, I'm going to step out and get something from the truck stop, but I'll be back.
All right. So, and then we do have, let's see, sorry, I'll read a super chat in a sec. What
I was going to say, it's interesting. I'm not only promoted to important, I'm also multiple people. That's kind of impressive.
Yeah. He was talking about this earlier. When right before Starsky showed up, I was like, okay, Zandring's here, I'm here. Like, okay, we don't have Lance, we don't have Starsky. And he's just like, yes,
Starsky wasn't.
Oh no, he showed up. He showed up. We everything was good. But right before he had showed up, we were just talking, and he's like, yeah. So basically, none of the important people are here, and I'm just like, I'm not really in a position to argue. I mean, I can do the show, but I mean, it's like. Nobody's sitting here. They're like, "Oh, did you hear that today on In Time, Nick Suter's going to be hosting?" No, that hasn't. Yeah. So, $5 from Killer Rabbit of and we've gone over this, and you'd think I could pronounce it, but Kerbanong. I think. I hope that's right. I'm making blueberry pie filling today. Blueberry oatmeal crumble bars at the farmers market Sunday. Snow blizzard expected as usual. Thank you so much for that, and we will be passing that on to the Vatra volunteer organization. So thank you, Killer Rabbit, once again for your support. We really do appreciate it. Secular Sakai, $1.99. Russia has no patriots; it has only nationalists. Thank you. That's actually a very, very important correction, and I appreciate that correction.
Yeah, that's very insightful too.
Yeah, I was that was a sort of a hot take, and I was trying to put that together, and I think that's a worthy correction. So thank you for that. That's a good point. All right, well, so Lance, we've covered the spectacular, just the unbelievable parade, the Victory Day parade, which managed to scrounge up one tank. I gave the Russians too much credit. Unfortunately, I had explained that they successfully pulled off the parade, and the tank managed to get from the beginning to the end. Without running out of supplies.
300 meters in.
Yeah. But I stand corrected. They did then after it did make it to the end, but then as they put it on the truck to take it away, it fell off. So.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Had I been there to load it, it wouldn't have fallen off.
Well, yeah. We understand that. Not everybody can be perfect, Xander.
So
not perfect. I'm just damn good at my job.
Okay.
So did you see that picture of Putin who fell off as well? Like,
oh yeah.
Days ago?
Yes.
No, I haven't seen
happens?
This. I heard, but I haven't seen
it. I don't think it's ever been fully explained. I think he just kind of tripped as he was walking. Now everybody has little oopsies like that, but for a guy who really prides himself on, passing off as the great fit super, I ride bareback horses and wrestle with polar bears, it kind of makes him look like a bit of an idiot. But
the reason he fell is because he's wearing those boots with like platforms.
Oh, lifts? Oh my god.
Yeah. Because like it's not a secret, everybody knows that. And sometimes it's kind of tricky to walk wearing those because they're like 6 or 7 centimeters high, like tall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why it's easy to trip and fall down.
I thought he fell because a snail. I thought he fell because a snail blew by him. But yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, what the next step is after you get the lifts? It's the spray-on tan.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you're really a great leader, then you get the adult diapers to go with it.
And the comb over.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to have we'll do this maybe after the show. We got to have Starsky read his snail thesis to you that somebody emailed to him. It's a spectacular thesis. But so we've got a couple other super chats I want to make sure we get, and then I want to. So we've covered the parade. We haven't done Eurovision, which I think is important for a couple of reasons, and. Let's see. We covered the parade. We covered some of the new weapon systems going in. We also have not covered the Russia withdrawing from the arms treaty. We can discuss that in a minute. So if there are any questions or any follow-up, I want to make sure that Lance has some time there. But $9.99 from Michelle Ferguson for Starsky's Ice Cream Fund. Also, Michael Mitchell's 110 New Zealand. Thank you all so much for that. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the support, and we're very pleased to be able to pass that on to the Luttra Volunteer Organization. Also, Secular Sake, who had correctly corrected me on Russia has no patriots, it has only nationalists. $9.99. Ukraine has true patriots, love of Ukraine, protecting their families, and democratic liberties drive Ukrainian soldiers, not hatred, fear, or envy of neighbors, like residents of Mordor. Slava Ukraine. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Gentlemen?
Ukrainians are fighting because we love our families. Russians are fighting because they hate Ukrainians. That's obvious.
Lance, anything to add?
Not really. I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say they all hate Ukrainians, but I think a significant number of them probably do. I think a lot of the people that are fighting right now are really just fighting because they don't really have much of an option. They get, rounded up, thrown into a bus, sent to a reception center where they're given a uniform and a gun and put back on the bus and taken straight to the front. There's not a lot of option to say, screw this and walk off.
No.
Yeah, what would the Russian be if he lived in China or Brazil or Kazakhstan? Alive.
Brilliant.
It's dark humor, but that's what happens in these situations. Starsky has some of the best jokes.
But there's truth to it because, look at how many of them fled before the borders got shut down. It was, so many of them realized just what a nightmare their country has turned into. I never feel comfortable with this, all Russians are bad thing. What I really feel is that there are a lot of them that probably are decent people that aren't given a chance to be decent because the nature of the regime makes it almost impossible for them to do that. You see in Ukraine, for example, you get the missile attacks or all the other stuff that's going on, and the Ukrainian people band together to help one another. You're not really seeing a lot of that on the Russian side. Everybody's in it for himself. And that, I think, speaks to a difference in a way you view the world, and it's because it's kind of been beaten into them for centuries. Is the only way to survive is to look out for yourself, look out for number one. You don't have a sense of community, and that translates into the phrase we were just dropping, which is there are no patriots in Russia, there are nationalists. Because patriotism is loving your country for what it is and being proud of it. You don't see a lot of that. What you see is people doing exactly what a nationalist does, which is everybody who isn't Russian is bad. Which is not a positive outlook on life. It's negative. It's looking out for number one again. And I think I feel sorry for them because I know a bunch of Russian people and I have respect for them, but it's, I think, difficult for them to be, I hate to put it in a term that will be misconstrued, but it's hard for them to be human living in that alien environment, if that makes sense.
I was trying to find the word. It's not vicious cycle, but it's a word of sort of a depraved and vacuous culture. But yeah, it's an environment that is thrives on toxicity and succeeds by pandering to the worst of human nature, which was the entire concept of the secret police, by the way.
True.
So, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask, Commander?
Well, I'll echo something I saw on 𝐍𝐤𝐬𝐚𝐬's channel recently, and he was saying, yeah, the ground conditions are such that the Ukrainians won't have started their offensive yet. We're going to look towards maybe the end of May, probably early June before something really happens. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, yet you keep seeing the Russians making claims that the offensive has already started and we've stopped it and we've destroyed dozens of Abrams and Leopard tanks and everything. It's just like fantasy world.
Well, if this is the offensive already starting, what are they going to say when they actually have to deal with a real offensive bearing down on them? That's the other thing. It's almost as if the Russian mindset is very immediate and very, okay, this is what's happening now. This is how I'm going to respond now, without any thought to the consequences of that decision tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is interesting, is that we've noticed kind of a reduction in the amount of fires that are going across the line, artillery barrages, etc., and lack of continuing probing assaults by them in the 𝐒𝐸𝐵 and Bakhmut areas. And a lot of people are saying it's because they're running out of ammo. And in most other armies, you would see that kind of thing developing, and you're going, well, they've already said they're anticipating an enemy offensive, so they're husbanding their resources, laying stocks in for reserves and reaction forces, how to deal with it when the offensive comes. But this is the Russian army, and they haven't shown any propensity for doing that thus far. So I think it really is. They're just running out of stuff. I'm just not sure that they are making an effort to assemble reserves or stockpile munitions for counterattacks. I think they aren't thinking that far ahead. Go ahead, sir.
I believe that they will stockpile their ammunition in several areas that they really want to keep, like in Crimea, for example, probably Donetsk, but they won't be able to use as much artillery as previously, all around the all along the front line, because we're talking about more than 2,000 kilometers. Probably they will prepare to defend some specific areas. Again, we're talking about Crimea. Recently, we saw pictures provided by ATESH, Crimean partisans, Ukrainian partisans, that walked around those trenches, those defense lines prepared by Russians. They made a lot of beautiful pictures and sent all that footage to the Ukrainian media. So probably we can expect Russians having their ammo stockpiles in those areas. But I don't think that they will be able to show some, convincing firepower in the area of like Melitopol, for example, Mariupol, the Severodonetsk, of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's, as Frederick the Great said, he who defends everything defends nothing. You have to choose specific areas that are important. And that's what they seem to kind of be doing. But the question is, are they choosing areas because they're important to them or because they are important from a strategic or operational perspective? And I'm not sure it's the latter. I think that they've decided that this is important to me, so I'm going to try to hold it, not looking at the fact that it's likely to end up isolated, cut off, outflanked, what have you, when the hammer finally does fall.
Yeah. One thing that we should expect from them is when, for example, Ukrainian armed forces start liberating huge areas, and eventually they will approach Crimean Peninsula. Russians will start screaming like crazy that one step closer, they will use nukes. And they will start playing, those crazy maniacs, whatever, like, desperate psychopaths and stuff, like, we are crazy, we will use our nukes, which we should, again, just ignore completely, because we know that Russians were warned by the US, by the NATO alliance, that in case they use something like that, any sort of weapons of mass destruction, they are finished. That's why they will not use it. But because they want to scare the hell out of people or out of international community, that's exactly what we will see.
Yeah.
Lance, do you have
in cases?
Do you have an over under on that?
You break glass.
So you had said that once, if I recall, that you thought there was at least a 40% chance that they would cross a line, either chemical or nuclear weapons, before this was done. And I think Starsky's made a good point, which is once they get to Crimea, which I think is absolutely inevitable and probably sooner rather than later. And now with the addition of longer range missiles, which I'm curious as to how, and we just had a question about whether that hit targets inside of Russia, but how the longer range missiles play into this. Do you think do you have an over-under on whether or not Russia would cross a line like that?
I think it's one of those, they're like NATO has probably drawn red lines and conveyed those red lines to the Russians. The Russians have probably drawn similar red lines. They probably haven't effectively conveyed them to anybody, and drawing a red line without making sure the message gets through is kind of pointless, but they draw them for PR reasons. It's propaganda saying, don't you dare do this or we'll, blow you to kingdom come. And I think that's the problem, is that they're likely, I think, before the end to do something insane like that. But they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're not expressing that threshold of don't push us past this point effectively. Their whole message has been, we're going to, do our big thing if you don't give us everything you want. And I think that's the difference, is that when the US and or NATO draws red lines, there's a sense of, okay, we're not going to allow you to do this, but everything you do up to that point, we're not going to really make a big issue of it. And, that's what diplomacy is. That's what negotiation is. That's what power politics is. The Russians are not playing that game. They're playing the child throwing a tantrum in the candy aisle because mommy won't buy him sweets.
Was I correct? Did you hear this? Oh God, Starsky's going to kill me for this one. You heard about them changing? They're not going to be doing the Z's on the tank anymore. They're going to put on the side of the tank. They're going to put an S. You heard about that, Lance?
No, but I can sense a good joke coming.
Scheisse, you know me too well. The more serious I get, as soon as Nick starts to get serious, it. Well, yeah, they're gonna change them to an S. They figure it'll make the tanks go faster because then people will look at it and say, "Look at the S car go." Anyways, okay, that was bad. I know, but I just love Starsky's snail analogy from the beginning. Catch you up on. Did you catch? So you basically figured out that if a snail had done the invasion, it would have gotten further than the Russians have. They're just calculating like the average pace of a snail. Wow. All right, so $9.99 from Danny Carver, Captain Obvious Rules. And yeah, I apologize. I don't think Xandring will ever be on air with me again for that joke, but okay. So the two outstanding things I wanted to discuss is Eurovision and Russia's withdrawal. Now the Eurovision, because that wasn't actually an ongoing thing. Starsky, can you talk to us about what happened with that?
Russian withdrawal from Eurovision. I believe that last year, as soon as the invasion started, a lot of international organizations and contests and different institutions they condemned Russians. One of them was the Eurovision contest. They said that they will not accept Russian representatives until this invasion, is going in Ukraine. So last year, I believe Ukraine received the first place. Which again, we all know, and we will all agree that it was rather a political decision. It's obvious. At the same time, I think that it's absolutely awesome that people, not politicians, but people of art, can raise the awareness internationally, and that they can influence things like that. So in terms of raising public awareness, I think that it was a huge win of the international community. The Eurovision 2022, Eurovision 2023. Is being held hosted in the UK. I think it's an awesome decision, absolutely. Georgie, Ukraine Matters, went there, I believe, together with his wife, lucky bastard. So, it's the third Eurovision that I missed because of freaking Russian invaders. I will never forget that in my life.
I had realized, but I think you already told this story, so I should maybe move on. But a Ukrainian won. I thought it was a Eurovision contest. A Ukrainian girl had won and was asked to sing a song with a Russian, and she refused. And I thought
it was in Italy. It was a contest for juniors, and the organizers of this contest, they decided that our Ukrainian participant will be singing at the same stage with the Russian representative, and she knew that. She knew that if she was gonna express any sort of protest or whatever, then she would be like expelled, you know. But she decided that she will follow the rules and stuff, and she was preparing for this. And when the time came, she went to the stage, and instead of singing, she said this absolutely powerful speech. She said she was not gonna sing at the same stage with a representative of a country that kills Ukrainian children. And even though she didn't win this contest, but she won in the eyes of all Ukrainians.
I think it was absolutely amazing, and she's been elevated to near national hero status, which I think she deserves. That takes actually a lot of courage.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind her singing together with this Russian participant if this Russian participant came up to her and said, "I'm really freaking sorry for what my country did to your country. And I'm really ashamed of what my soldiers are doing to your people. I'm really ashamed of our missile strikes, Ukrainian kids dying." That I understand, but unfortunately there's not so many decent Russians that can acknowledge that.
Yep. Well, so my last question is about the Russian withdrawal from the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, and I was wondering if either of you gentlemen had anything to say about that. It hasn't made a lot of news, and maybe justifiably so, but some people have asked some questions about it, so I want to make sure that we hit on the significance or lack thereof of that withdrawal. So can either of you gentlemen tell me anything about it? We'll start with you, Starsky.
I believe it's just another attempt of Russia to intimidate the international community. Nothing more than that, really.
I would agree. The treaty really doesn't have what I would call big limits on anything. It's mostly a feel-good kind of treaty. And considering the losses they've suffered in equipment, saying that, okay, we're not going to build more tanks when you're not at war, and then you lose a whole bunch of the tanks that you do have, and you say, yeah, we're going to build a lot more tanks than the treaty allows, except you're going to take forever to get back up to the numbers where you potentially violate said treaty. So it's a PR move. It's not anything practical.
All right. Well,
and in my infinite, great, awesome wisdom, I agree with all of what they said.
Me too.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's because I know when to just agree and keep my mouth shut. Sort of. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all. So, again, a reminder, Pat Lowinger next week on Tuesday to discuss misconceptions about policing in the U.S. And then a week from Tuesday, we will have on Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of all U.S. forces in Europe, also a former commander of NATO ground forces. He is going to be on to discuss both what's happening at the strategic and the tactical level in Ukraine, the Ukraine's relationship with Russia, and Russia's relationship with the rest of the world, in particular NATO, how this affects NATO, how NATO is likely to respond, and concerns he has about how the alliance is going to be able to contain Russia in the future. So this will be a week from Tuesday. I think it's going to be a great show. We are obviously privileged and delighted to have him on. Operator Starsky as well, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll be up for, like I said, a call-in show next time. Anyone who wants to call in and say hi and ask Starsky your questions in person, and we will do that next time if that sounds amicable to you, sir.
He's asking you, Starsky.
I'm waiting to ask Starsky. I asked Starsky on air, so he can't really say no. And I realize that's like a kind of a dick move. I know, but no. Well, Commander McMillan, thank you so much for joining us. Starsky as well. Thank you for coming on. No worries. So good to see you all, and we look forward to catching up with you guys next week and seeing you all on a Tuesday for Misconceptions About Policing in the U.S. with Pat Lowinger. Have a good night, all.